we are going to now come into the Q&A time. We've got a few already that's in the chat. You can either use that, put your questions in the chat if you're a bit shy. I hope you're not. And if you're okay, then now's the time to kind of brush your hair while your camera comes on so that you can ask your question directly to the speakers. I will go straight to the chat just to kick us off with those who've already put their questions in there. I think the first couple, this is to Richard and Caleb. You've got a few questions that have come through. Sorry, my chat is just loading now. And particularly around this, the wonderful mountain, Richard, that you've alluded to, and now everyone seems quite obsessed about. We've got a few questions there. What do we do to see if we need a different mountain or a puna or something else? It's asked by Kane Moon from TWA. And Kane, if you want to come off mute, you're welcome to elaborate on that question too, if you'd like. But I'll go to you, Richard and Caleb, to kick us off with that question.
Kia ora, I can't see the chat, so the only way I can see it is by you talking to me. Sometimes you can work so hard that you think that it's there, and then you go, I've looked at the last 10 years and something's not quite right. And I wanted to be a little bit fair to Herenga Waka. I also looked at our parity of achievement across every other university, and we're kind of in the middle. But then this year I checked things like, oh, Otago's doing really well, but their disparity is pretty high, right? You know, sorry, Otago people, I just want to chuck you under the bus there. But it's like, so, you know, you've really got to look at it and go, you know, it's not enough to say that I feel good. The question is, are the results tangible? And then you say, what do we need to do? And it's okay to say, I'm trying my best, but it's not quite working. Like, you just got to be comfortable with accepting that not everything works. That's okay. Just do something different.
Also, to add to that as well, Richard, in terms of the question being, doesn't it still suggest that the mountain is a solution? Now, our initial foray, we are a Tauira services department, so obviously the application of these insights are going to be from a Tauira services model. One thing I forgot to mention in our next steps is that I'm branching out with this methodology and looking at other departments in terms of how they can incorporate these type of kind of insights and views. So I've been working closely with our library team in terms of their systems and looking at, well, demographical, behavioral, plugging information back in, looking at Konai levels and what have you. So the ethos of, I see Te Ata Hapara as an ethos in terms of being Tauira-centric and using that data to make data-driven solutions. We are currently doing it from a service model, but the application of that ethos is completely agnostic. And I'm finding some really quick wins and great successes by applying exactly the same methodology to our friends in the library department, who are obviously a completely different service model to us.
And just to add to that, so I wanted to give an example. Don't own the information. Canterbury, a couple of presentations ago, put the information in front of the tauira. And so they could do self-management, and they could look at themselves and own that. That to me is giving up the autonomy and having to own everything and actually democratizing it. I thought that was a really clever move. We're looking at how we do that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And I think this one was directly asked of Titoko by Chona Kennedy. What is the ratio between an advisor and students?
So our model is expensive. So we're running a ratio between 700 to 800 per students, which is, and the model itself is about $3 million. So, you know, I'll be really frank with it. We also spend probably about $17 million on student services across the board. So yeah, it's expensive. And when you look at Te Wānanga's one, they're using technology to do a lot of heavy lifting. We're kind of starting with a lot of muscle, and I actually think there's a sweet spot in there for people, and it's certainly cost effective. So yeah, it's expensive. The other thing is the advisors, and we're debating this, they finish the enrolment process. And the reason why we think that's important is that you can help people all day long, but if their course has been planned incorrectly, you're actually swimming upstream. So we actually think that, and then if the advisor doesn't know intimately how their courses work and how they work to achieve the fastest degree possible, then we're providing pastoral support, but not destination support. So we've mixed those two roles together, and we actually, there's been marmite about this in the institution. We went in and we grabbed the faculty advisors basically to build the model. And it was a fairly difficult change process, I'll be completely honest. And anybody in the varsities will start going, woo, now once I said that, and that's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Cool. For those of you whose questions I am reading out, feel free to jump in if you feel that you want to elaborate more on your questions. I have from Joe Tungiasu asking, how do you support and engage with distance students within your holistic advising systems? Maybe if I go to TWA and then back to you, Richard. Sorry, question was, how do you support and engage with distance students within your holistic advising systems?
Yeah, so our current implementation of, we've got various learning management systems, and one of which, well, initially we had one journey that was looking at them both, but then when we realized that the hands-on courses, in terms of like Aotearoa and Whakairo, don't use or don't put too much of an onus on that learning management system outside of just handing in assessments and what have you. Whereas our courses that favor more being able to come in via Zoom or are predominantly provided by learning from home, their learning management systems are pivotal. They need to use those platforms week in, week out. So our initial journey creation, we had a bit of a mixed bag, because when we were calling on non-engaged students, a lot of them were like, well, mate, I don't need to log into that for 3 months. That's not really, or we don't even use it at all. Or we had programs where, well, in this region, they use it every week, but in that region, they don't. So we split out our journeys. So we've got one for one system, one for the other, and recognizing that one, they need to use it. There's an expectation they use it, expectation they log in. It's where the program is literally being delivered. And so for that, we have a much tighter window in terms of our engagement checks and the case creation to then for our Te Hapara agents to follow up manually. The other one, we have a much longer one. And I'm even debating whether or not we even create cases for them because of the varying usages of those platforms. It came from our insights and data, and more importantly, it came from anecdotal information from our Te Hapara agents themselves. I sit in with them, the team, and constantly listen into their phone calls. And yeah, so the biggest difference for us is the platform. We have the ability to create much tighter workflows, recognizing that those platforms are key to those that's where they're delivered. So our turnarounds and our support and potential to escalate to our agents just needs to be much tighter.
Awesome.
I can tag in for that for our team as well too. So we ran into a little bit of that within the data initially too, because some of our initial reporting data, the initial engagement in their courses came through like tutorial enrollments, lab enrollments. That obviously is different for internationals. So that did create some red flags, like initially that weren't actually warranted, but I think in this, those are those kind of issues that happened initially that have been able to be rolled out a little bit easier now. But in general, the holistic advising does work across. We just access it all through Teams and can connect with students virtually in that way. But again, where they're international, where they're across the globe, that is hard within working hours to necessarily match that up always too. So there's difficulties within that, but we are able to provide similar holistic advice.
Yeah, so one of the challenges in that is, digital should be okay if they're engaging in digital and that works. So we need to do an assessment of whether or not it's a responsive and working channel. The other one is looking at the student engagement data. It's not 9 to 5, it's bloody all the time. And so, how do you build an HR model around that? When it's expensive as it is right now. The other thing is we're building FAQ sets and we're working out questions over the time of the years. So you could use your comms model to say, actually, we find out at this time of year, these are our most frequently asked questions because we're mining all of our data. And so what we're finding is that we're getting ahead of a lot of the questions by doing it and putting it in the knowledge base. And then that's the pathway to a bot. But to be honest, we've got to start thinking that our models needs to reflect our community behaviour. So that's a bit of a lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Were there instances when the support for Māori and PI work had and led to successful completion? If so, what strategies or approaches did you employ that differed from previous methods? Question from Maria for Yava. To both of you. So we'll go Richard and then back to TWA.
Hand on heart, we haven't analysed that data at the moment. We've got a couple of initiatives that are targeted, which we're measuring, which is in that respect, but we haven't done that level of assessment. What we did respond to is that we started saying, you could choose a Māori one. Everybody just said, I want a Māori. So we just had to change the policy straight off the bat. So where we think that there's really strong feedback, we try to pivot, but is that more successful? I would hope so, but I'll tell you in 3 months.
Yeah, we're in a similar boat. The majority of our year has been the implementation and configuration of the workflow and methodology, and then connecting everything together. Very high level and anecdotally, I am seeing higher unit completion rates for our higher CONI levels versus everyone else, and similar to with our direct phone calls. And also, because the thing that we were trying to do with Te Ata Hapara being a bit of a smaller team and kind of owning a lot of these processes and being able to configure these systems ourselves is the ability to pivot quickly and make changes to processes and scripts, and being extremely agile with our approach. If something looks like it's working, we can then pivot to doing more of that quite quickly and roll out the training immediately. So we are anecdotally, I am seeing an increase in unit completions this year for our digital efforts between higher CONI levels and overall. Certainly, well, that's a task for me next year, is to paint that picture and kick it up to Teresa.
Awesome. Richard, specifically for you, but I'll open to TWA as well. Samuel Holloway is asking, have you had pushback from academic staff around the course level equity gap dashboard? And if so, how have you managed this?
Course. And I would imagine everybody in this room has probably except TWA, because that's the main. But listen, everybody's at different maturity levels in an institution. There's no such thing as this is the typical academic or this is how we think. It's probably like the way that we vote, quite differently, right? So yes, we have, and it's usually around, is there a problem? Is that at all in the first place? And because it's so data rich, like where are you going to go when we show it? Sequentially over 20 years, there's a significant difference in outcomes, right? So oh, I don't believe it. Well, then let's look at the maths, mate, and have a look at it. So you can approach it like that. But by and by, most people want to make a difference if they're in education, right? So it's a pretty good group. It's not like I'm trying to convince an audience on 3ZB to be more culturally sensitive, right? So, we by and by they are, but occasionally you do get feedback saying, why are they, why is there special treatment and all this sort of stuff? It definitely happens, So that's just a normal people change process. I think we mentioned it, that people and change was a really significant piece of work and bringing people along with you. We did roadshows, we communicated, but there's always like 100 different kaupapa going on in an institution at once. So what would be useful when we've given the feedback to our institution is, let's do like 5 things really well, as opposed to 30 things, and create the noise where nobody can actually understand the message. So hand on heart, yeah. But most people are pretty understanding and get into it.
Over to Ross and Teresa, any pushback from your academic staff, and how have you managed this?
Any examples, Teresa? For me, it's Oh, I'll let you go first. Sorry.
Yes, yeah, we started our journey with our academic staff quite early. So when Richard was still there, we started those conversations and going around to the different forums and the different leadership teams and sort of putting our face in all the different hui that they have across the 3 different takiwā and starting that conversation early before we even went out and went live with the kaupapa, and then supported that with email comms. But like Richard said, there's a lot going on in any tertiary institute at any given time. And this is sort of one kaupapa of many that are happening within, our organisation and many organisations across the sector at any given time. We've had some feedback in terms of, things that we could potentially be doing better in terms of communication. I think Ross alluded to that in his presentation, and we've really just taken that on board and sort of tweaked what we need to so that we know for next year to adjust our communications out to our academic team and ensure that we're bringing them along with us in that journey. But other than that, we've had quite a lot of really supportive kōrero and really supportive feedback. But yeah, absolutely some things that we can definitely do better from our perspective. Anything from your side, Ross?
Oh yeah, like you said, just to reiterate the importance of our internal communication, just to clarify and be very clear with what our intent and ethos is. Much like what Richard was saying, you sit on so much information and so much data you get in, and that's where from my learnings in terms of like always looking at this, that, or the other, you kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, well, this is a really easy solution. We just rebuild the entire universe, and it's like, well, that's just not going to happen. You can't do that. So it's like, well, we're going to do one thing and we're going to do it well, and we're going to have everyone on board and be abundantly clear that we're here to help everyone. We're all in the same Waka. We're all here for Tauira success, and we're all working together for the same thing.
Awesome. Those are all our questions that are in the chat. I will now open up the chance to everyone who's on the call. I noticed that we've got our wider TEC whānau that are here. We've got all of our universities that are here, Te Pukenga, our PTEs, and a few WDCs that are here too. You're very welcome to ask any questions, provide any comments that you might wish to. So I'll give you just a few minutes in case anyone wants to take up that opportunity.
Richard, I'd prepared myself for questions from you, so feel free.
I was just about to say no.
I am locked and loaded.
No, I just think you can clearly see the change and improvement in leadership since my absence. So yeah, I think just helpful. It's all good. It's all good.
Team, I did have one thing that's come up as I was listening to your presentations, and you have touched on it a little with the immediately previous conversation about presenting data to academics and how they might feel about that. I guess it's a wider question around something that you've both talked about, and that when you're identifying that you have done a lot of things for a long time and they haven't worked, there must be a number of people in any organisation who've been involved with the doing of those things, who maybe have owned these programs or these support services or have been teaching a certain way and will now need to change their practice. So my question to both of you, both your organisations and our presenters is, how do you work with staff to encourage them to stop doing something that they've got a embedded interest or belief in the value of? What are your techniques for having those conversations or encouraging a change in behaviour?
I'll give you a couple of examples, one that we put into practice and the other one that we're thinking about doing, right? So when we ask staff that you actually have to build your course in a particular way, otherwise the data is, I can't use it. Now, you shouldn't build courses based on my data requirements. They still need to, I mean, they're teaching and learning, right? So you had to find the middle ground and you built it with them. There was a huge amount of energy and time spent on training and feedback in that process. In fact, that was probably the best part of the change process. They spent a year building up before build and getting people along. So that was good. And also, they can see their own data. You just give it straight back to them. And, again, you democratize them and people get really interested in that. So we find out that's the case, although there's been some you just think you get it cleaned up and you just think you're making progress, and then the Wild West wants to come back and change it all over again. So it's never a fixed state. You're always holding the line like a forward pack. On the other side, when looking at the new system that clearly shows the people that are doing better than others, our conversation is, how do you approach this in an empowering way? Let's look at the ones that are nailing it. Let's see if there's something that we can reverse engineer from that process and actually kind of spread that learning out and use academics to teach academics. They don't necessarily love CSU units. Do you know, like, who are you? I'm an academic. But if you use another academic that they respect, well, then that's, having a discussion with them with their own iwi, right? So we think that's got legs in it. We've trialed it a little bit with a couple, and that'll be our approach to empower them rather than to slap them.
Yeah, we have a similar scenario at the moment. So our kaiako are very administrative heavy. They do the attendance records, course completions, unit completions, various aspects, and those are behaviors that our Konai level calculations are factoring in. We got a variety of demographical and behavioral, but the majority of behavioral things like, have you submitted your applications? Are you using the learning management platform? When was the last time you logged in? Haven't logged in for X amount of time? Have you attended class? If you haven't attended class, is there a categorization for your absence in terms of explained, non-explained, tangi leave, so on and so forth. So that's where I was referring back to, like, the kind of stepping on toes. We're not here to kind of replace or devalue the face-to-face in terms of the relationship building that our kaiako are doing, because we've got smaller classes and they have a rapport. So we've had to do a lot of internal comms, not only internal comms, but also fact finding in terms of, like, well, this is our capabilities, and here's what we can do. What would be of value to assist you? In terms of, well, they are putting in their attendance records, and they are very mindful of who is and who isn't there, but they wanted to see the outputs of our actions as well, so they could then kind of drill down to specifics in terms of, well, we've contacted this person, we've sent that person, this person hasn't opened an email, and that's where we were adding value to their work in terms of, like, well, that's great, because then it allows me to look at my attendance list and go, okay, well, these Bob, St. James, Sarah, and Graham, these are the people that I'll need to contact because of the work that you've been doing as well. Yeah, and there's a comment in chat about, when you say tracking behaviors, how do you define that, and what data are you collecting? So it kind of segues into that. We have learning management platforms that some classes, there is an expectation and a need for them to log in on an ongoing basis for the week-to-week course material. Some they don't have to. So we're looking at things in terms of, like, are they logging in? When's the last time they logged in? Did they complete those modules? Have they handed in their assessments on the dates that they're expected? So those are, coming back to the Georgia State methodology, one of many behavioral data points that we connect with the demographical to create the Konai levels that we use for our workflow.
Did you want to carry on with the next question that's come through on the chat, Ross? Do you collate and report the feedback that you get from tauira when you engage with them?
It's actually quite interesting, because I'm an implementation, like, previous to this I was a CX consultant implementing software into contact centers, so I'm very geeky in that sense, and wearing a hat in terms of collecting that type of data is our wheel set, but then it's the anecdotal and the tauira feedback that I'm collecting from my agents now, which is a new hat for me that I've been wearing this year. It's funny it's come from Chona, because I literally have intending to have a meeting with you specifically about this. So I have a very specific answer for you, Chona. Yes, and we'll talk soon.
For those of you who are wondering, Chona is from TWA, so I love that we're using this where you guys have your own discussions with each other.
Oh, yes.
No, it's a good chat, Chona. Don't worry about it. No, but yes, we are. So part of my operational thing is I I report to my team lead reports to Teresa. Part of our quality framework and operational framework is the monthly reporting that I'm collating, and it is a combination of data, cold hard data, and then also feedback and insights, because I'm sitting in with our team. I can hear, and I mark their phone calls as well from a quality framework perspective. So I'm listening in to good calls, bad calls, collecting anecdotal, and then feeding the insights from cold hard data, and just, by the way, this is something we're noticing as well, and feedback we're getting.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. If I'm ever asked by my boss how useful these sessions are, I will be sure to report that they provide an opportunity for organisations to have internal conversations with. So that's great. Sorry, Sarah, I interrupted you there.
No, it's fine, Veronica. I guess I wanted to pull together the last few questions. So what I'm hearing really clearly from both of the teams today is giving all the staff and academics and other senior leaders in your organisation that ability to access the data and see what you're collecting and learning. So those dashboards and those data points and those outcomes that you're seeing, that sounds like it's a really important part of carrying these conversations forward, and also helping them understand the value of what you're doing, or how what they are currently doing might not be serving learners. Would that be a fair way of kind of summarising that? So bringing them in and giving them what you're seeing, and that helps them shift their thinking sometimes if people are a bit stuck.
I mostly agree. I also think you need to simplify it beyond tech heads. Like we love drilling in. Yeah. I love drilling in. I can look at dots all day, but that's not what people want to see. Do you know, red, green, yellow. I had a really good conversation, as you said, with a South African university that's been doing this for a couple of years. Even, a UX idea on changing the colours from students, saying, and creating a more user-friendly interface for them, had dramatic impacts on their the students' engagement in it. So, constantly thinking, does this make sense to our community? And if it doesn't, if they're not engaging with it, then it doesn't. Yes, iterative. You're never going to rest, right? You're never going to rest.
And giving people the level of information that they need to do their job and understand what's happening. So we might have to not give them access to Ross's entire data set, because if they're not Ross, or I wouldn't be able to navigate that. So yeah, that sounds really sensible. Thanks, Richard.
We've got a hand raised, Davine. Davine, I hope I've said that correctly. Go ahead and ask your question.
Kia ora koutou, and no Davine Jensen tōku ingoa, Core Solomon Group. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for quite insightful session. I like the mountain concept, and so and tying in with, I think Ross just said about the university in South Africa doing exactly what we are doing currently, embarking on. We have in the Nelson Mandela University in particular, and Cape Town, University of Cape Town, I've done some studies through them, in particular the MBA, and we have what we call the Table Mountain concept. Until we all come to the same understanding, our people will thrive. And so this has really been a really quite an awesome journey to be on with TEC and with other PTEs, and of course with the Wānangas within Aotearoa. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you, Doreen. Thank you so much for that lovely comment. Last opportunity for any comments or questions before we close this segment off and let you all go on your merry way, as we know the time of year this is for you, your organisations, and most importantly, our learners across the country. Awesome. Well, I might then just come back to our presenters. If I could ask you now to just think very carefully about what your final message will be to everyone on this call, with the conversations that have been had, with the presentations that have been shared, with the wonderful comments and questions that have come out of our sector. If there was one final message that you could give us today as your last parting words, what would that be? We'll go in the order of, and sorry, Teresa, my girl, to put you first. We'll go Teresa, come over to Ross, go to Caleb. No, Caleb, you don't get to go behind Richard. Your turn too. And then we'll finish off with Richard, and then I'll provide you with a few more notices before we close off on this call. So over to you, Miss Teresa.
Oh, thanks, V. My ending message would really just be very simple: connect, communicate, and collaborate across your organisation and across the sector. I mean, we've had an opportunity to connect with other providers across the sector over the past 2 years, and just the insights and the thoughts and just the wonderful mahi that's happening across the sector has helped to sort of shape and change the way that we've thought and approached many different facets of the mahi that we're doing in the Wānanga space. So yeah, connect, collaborate, and connect with others. Over to you, Ross.
Yeah, this year for me has been implementing that workflow and the methodology. And the one thing that I struggled with was I've got so much data in my hands. Like, what the hell do I do with it? Or how do I actually measure it? And I was almost kind of frozen in fear in terms of, well, whatever I say is going to be an insight. And for me, it was about just clearly defining what your objective is and measure that. It's you could, like I said, I could rebuild the universe with the amount of information that we have in front of us, but that it's a gargantuan task if you just don't clearly define exactly what you're wanting to look at and measure results. So just, yeah. And like I said, there's always going to be a better way. There's always going to be a fancy tool. There's always going to be, well, if we did this and did that, and if we, invested in this or what have you, it's just like, no, we just start somewhere, measure it, expand.
What Teresa's saying, I think my takeaway would be similar to that. Being in my position and working kind of alongside Richard in these conversations, that's not something that necessarily happens all the time. So that's my value I'm taking away from this, is that mixing of the weeds and the higher level and the long-term approach, and continuing those kind of conversations and what we can, take away and adjust in those processes.
Awesome.
That was good. Well, kia ora, and just thank you for the opportunity. I've learned a great deal from all the presenters this year. I've stolen, thieved, plagiarised, whatever the formal academic word is. And Veronica, best of luck. I know this is your last hilly, so best of luck. Go save the Pacific. And but my one is, don't get addicted to the action. Follow the outcome and be prepared to give it up if it doesn't work. Although I caveat that with the Dream Conference person, he said it can actually take 2 or 3 years for a thing to start ticking over benefits. So I'm sort of caught up in that world, but sometimes it's as much about what you stop doing than what you do. But be obsessed with the outcome is my theory.
Awesome. Well, can I ask everyone to join me in giving a virtual round of applause for the wonderful presenters that we have had with us this morning, now coming into the afternoon. What a treat it has been. And for those of you who've been on previous capability sessions, you will know that the goal of the TEC has been about trying to present the different contexts that sit across the tertiary sector. And in this one, specifically around learner-centric systems, we've had the lovely privilege of having Te Herenga and Te Wānanga Aotearoa with us. So thank you kindly to our presenters. Thank you kindly to our attendees who've been on. Thank you to all of our TEC whānau who've also been here. Just a few more notices from me before we close off. This recording, it will be made available roughly a couple of weeks from now. We usually forward it back out to the database that we have. We did just have one notice that we wanted to promote to you, and that is we have a disability session that's scheduled next week. The focus of our session is how to collect data safely and how to use it appropriately in a mana enhancing way. So if there are some of you who are really interested in that session, it's a little bit of a targeted one, but open and welcome to everybody. We will forward the information in an email to you all. Likewise, if any of you want to get involved with this mahi, i.e. you're brave enough to want to suggest a certain project or initiative that you're working across, and you want to chat to us, so Sarah will wave to you now. Sarah Williams from the TEC. We've got Jordan Powell as well from the TEC. And as Richard alluded to, I am finishing up with the TEC. It's been a wonderful journey in the last 12 months delivering these sessions. I'm a real believer that bringing the collective, and the quote that Davine ended us was really fitting. Until we all come together, we're not going to see real changes. So let's continue to come together in the new year. And on that note, on behalf of all of us here at the TEC, we wish you a happy and safe festive season ahead. I know it's a busy time for semester breaks and end and, you know, exams and all sorts of stuff. So continue to do the good mahi that you all do in your individual spaces. We see you, we're here for you, we want you to keep going, and we want all of our learners to succeed. So as we started with the karakia, I'll now invite Teresa to close us off with a karakia, and then we'll all go on our merry way and give you back a couple of minutes for your day. So thank you for that, Teresa.
Nā mahi vei, karakia whakamutunga, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou e riki a hukaraiti. Me te aroha mo te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake. Amene.
Amene. All right, take care everyone. Ka kite.